So Riley Gaines was a very talented swimmer. She swam for the University of Kentucky on a swimming scholarship. She was so good, she made it to the 2022 NCAA Finals. And at the NCAA Finals, she tied for 5th place in the women's 500-yard freestyle with trans woman and University of Pennsylvania student Lia Thomas. They got the exact same time. But the NCAA only had one trophy, and they just decided to give it to Lia Thomas, and they just mailed Gaines a trophy later on. And because of this, Gaines has not let this go. I would say Gaines is allowing Thomas to live in her head rent-free, but honestly, I think Gaines is probably making bank going on speaking tours in colleges and conservative groups about how awful it is that trans women are playing in women's sports. Now, the only reason I'm even covering this is because a little while back, Riley Gaines did an interview with Kevin Ferris, who hosts a radio program on Insurrection Radio Cities 92.9, which is a very conservative radio station where I live in central Illinois, so conservative that they literally hosted a bus trip to January 6th. So we're going to watch this interview between Kevin Ferris and Riley Gaines and react. And just to be clear, Agitation Rising did reach out to Riley Gaines for an interview. This video would probably be very different if she had even responded and come on and actually got asked difficult questions, but she chose not to respond, and this is what we have to work with. So before we begin, I want to go over some of the facts about the 2022 NCAA First Division Tournament. So, Lia Thomas won the women's 500-yard freestyle race in 4 minutes and 33.24 seconds. She came in 5th in the 200-yard race with 1 minute and 43.4 seconds, and 8th in the 100-yard race with 48.4 seconds. So this means that 4 cis women beat Thomas in the 200-yard race, and 7 cis women beat her in the 100-yard race. And while she came first in the 500-yard race, her time is still 9 seconds behind the world record set by cis woman Katie Ledecky in 2017. According to women's records listed by USA Swimming, Thomas is the 15th fastest swimmer in women's sports, meaning 14 cis women are better than she is. Now, at this tournament, 27 all-time records were broken, none by Lia Thomas or any trans woman. 18 of those records were by Kate Douglas of North Carolina State University, a cis woman. None of this shows an overwhelming advantage at all. So these are the actual empirical facts of what occurred at the tournament, and not just your feeling. So link for all the facts in the description below. So here we go. Let's watch them.
My guest today made waves after she tied with Lia Thomas for 5th place in the 200-yard freestyle at the 2022 NCAA championship meet. Since then, she's taken a stand highlighting the need to protect women's sports and has made a name for herself as a leader within the conservative movement. Her advocacy has driven her to make many appearances on national news networks and speak on college campuses. A woman that frankly has more balls than any man I know, Riley Gaines, is here today, everybody, and she is...
Just to be clear, according to him, it's delusional to say that women have balls. Just want to point that out.
Speechless. Riley, thank you so much for joining me.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on.
Appreciate it. Well, honest, I know that you have many other places you could be talking to right now, but I want to make sure that everybody knows just who Riley Gaines is. They should already know, honestly, at this point. But let's dive in right from the beginning. So you started swimming at the age of 4.
I did. Yes. And so I graduated when I was 22. And so I dedicated 18 years of my life to my sport, which of course includes, your sport specific training, your swimming, but it also includes weightlifting, your diet, your sleep schedule, your physical rehabilitation, not to mention the social sacrifices. You don't get to go to prom. You don't get to come home for Christmas. You don't get to come home when you're in college. You don't get to come home for summer. We were there every single day, training 6 hours a day, swimming 10 miles a day. It's relatively miserable, but of course, the outcomes are always worth it, which is why we do it.
Absolutely. And your outcomes were actually kind of hindered a little bit because men started competing in women's sports. And so when was like the first time you started to notice that people of the opposite gender were competing in the sport, like a man competing in women's sports?
You know, really the first time this became relevant to me, especially in my world of swimming, we saw a case of this. It was a female, then transitioning, goes by Skylar Baylor, now competes with the men, and this happened at Harvard. And so I saw this, and I, of course, didn't necessarily support it, but I thought, you know, this is a woman competing with the man. There's no threat here. But it never once occurred to me that this could go the other way and we would be under threat. It just seemed out of realm. And even if it were to happen, I thought there would be governing bodies in place that wouldn't allow it to happen.
You would think, right?
You would think. And so I didn't become aware of this happening the other way around, really, until I was directly impacted by it. Yeah. I became aware of this swimmer, Lia Thomas, about November of my senior year. So November of 2021 was the first time that it was brought to my attention that there was a male competing against the women, especially at a level as high as we were competing.
Yeah, and the culmination of so your senior year of college, the culmination of all that work, 18 years of hard work, comes down to the NCAA championships, in which you were in the same race as Lia Thomas, and
conservatives like Ferris do this all the time. What is this person's real name? I'm so confused. He did this with Caitlyn Jenner. Oh no, is it Caitlyn? Is it Bruce? I don't know. It's like, this is their legal name now. Like, Caitlyn Jenner ran for the governor of California as Caitlyn Jenner. Ferris isn't actually confused. The only reason they do this is purely rhetorical, right? He wants to make it seem like, well, this is so confusing, and because it's confusing, you should be scared of trans people.
As you can see, I'm pulling it up on screen. This is the NCAA, the governing body that's supposed to be protecting you as a swimmer. And you were obviously at this race, but I want to show everybody a little bit of this so that they can kind of understand where you were at physically, so we can talk about where your head was at. So starting off, everybody, here is the beginning of the race in which Lia and Riley actually tied. Here's that.
Take your mark.
Ruck will go out for it. Ivy will go out for it. They may be 2 seconds ahead of Lia Thomas in lane number 5. They have the speed to be able to really jump on this first 100. This is going to be a lot tighter of a race.
So from the beginning, the announcers from the NCAA were obviously very enamored with Lia Thomas, despite the fact that she, whatever, gets further, it stays around 4th, 5th, 6th, almost the entire race. Where was your head at walking up to the block, getting on, take your mark, go? What were you thinking?
You know, really, first, before anything, it was a distraction. Swimming is, of course, a lot physical. There's a lot of physical that goes into it, but just like a lot of sports, there's a lot of mental that goes into it too. And so I can't even tell you the mental distraction, the mental hindrance. One, the locker room, that played on our mental toll.
That was another, and I want to let you keep going, but that was one thing I wanted to get into at some point. So Lia was in the same locker room as all the other women?
Yes. Yes. We were not forewarned. We were not told. The only time we became aware that we would be sharing a locker room with Thomas was when we had to sit there and watch this 6'4" man disrobe and show his male parts. That's how we became aware that that's the situation we would be in. It felt like betrayal, belittlement. Of course, it's awkward, embarrassing, uncomfortable. Yeah. That to me was really worse than the competition piece.
If anyone else if I were to do something like that, it'd be criminal. I would get arrested on the spot.
Now all you have to do is say you're a woman, and it's not only is it just happening, it's encouraged. It's
exactly.
celebrated.
Exactly. What else was going through your head though, on top of that?
On top of the mental distraction and sense of, wondering of what this outcome would look like, I really felt like I was going into the race with my hands tied behind my back, and not because of the women I was competing against. I knew these women just like myself. We all had a chance to win that national title. We'd all trained. We'd all gone through things that only women go through when it comes to being a woman and what that looks like, especially in regards to training at that level. So that that to me, and if I had gotten beaten by them, which I did get beat by some of the girls in that heat, of course, that's not something that frustrates me. I'm proud of those girls. I'm proud of myself for finishing top 5 in the country. Yeah. That's a huge honor. But in regards to competing against a male, of course, you feel like your hands are tied behind your back. You're going into this race with an understanding that there's an inherent unfair advantage, that no matter the training, no matter anything you do, nothing you do will overcome the advantage that Thomas has.
Absolutely. And that's one thing I wanted to get to. So I'm going to play just now the end of the race, because I thought this was interesting as well. Seeing you guys tie, I mean, obviously a lot of people were looking at Miss Ruck, Taylor Ruck, because she won the race. But coming to the end of it, you guys both tied.
Stanford's Taylor Ruck has twice been an NCAA runner-up individually. Ruck has led the entire way, and in the 200-yard freestyle, it's a wire-to-wire win for Taylor Ruck. Isabel Ivy takes.
And then we see, obviously, you in lane 1 and Thomas in lane 5 come both in right there in neck and neck. It was, I believe you guys ended at 1:43.40 was your time, which is incredibly impressive. Congratulations.
Thank you. It was, first of all, watching that again, I remember how badly that hurt. That was not a best time for me. That was, I had added some time, but it definitely was not a best time for Thomas. Thomas added nearly 2 seconds, which in swimming, 2 seconds doesn't sound like a lot, of course, but in swimming, that's a lot of time.
Yeah.
And so, of course, what's going through my head, I touch the wall, I look at the scoreboard, and I see 5 by my name, indicating I got 5th, which I was honored. I was, that's great. I, of course, knew I could do better, but whatever. It was my last race as a collegiate swimmer. I was glad to be done. And I look at Thomas's name. Actually, before I even looked at my own name, I looked at Thomas's name and I saw the 5. And then I saw my 5 and I looked at my teammates and their jaws were dropped on the side of the pool. And I'm just thinking to myself, there's no way we tied. There's no way.
There's no way. Despite the clear empirical evidence that you tied. Nope, it's impossible.
I had already made up my mind that I wasn't going to get on the podium. That was going to be my form of protest. I wanted to swim my race. I didn't think it was fair for me to not swim my last collegiate race ever in terms of boycotting and protesting. So I thought to myself, I won't get on the podium. But now these thoughts are going on in my head, behind the scenes, okay, now if I don't get on the podium, there's not even an empty spot because we have to share the freaking podium.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I was thinking. It was this a jumbled mix of emotions, all in a short span of time.
Absolutely. And I mean, it seems incredibly unfair. But one thing I do want to ask is, you mentioned the biological advantage earlier. There are some out there that I've seen that say, well, Lia Thomas came in 5th. She came in 5th. So how could she have a biological advantage? She didn't even win. What would you have to say to people that say things like that?
So this is actually like the one point in this entire interview where Ferris actually asks a challenging question, but, let's not break an arm jerking him off quite yet.
It's, first of all, I'm not one for speculation. Everything that I say, I try to be well-versed on. I try to research. I try to consider different perspectives, but I can wholeheartedly say that Thomas didn't try. This was all part of a bigger picture. Thomas, the first day, wins the national title, beating Olympians, American record holders by body lengths.
Though that first race that she won was, again, still 9 seconds behind the world record set by a cis woman. So when she's saying, she's defeating Olympians, Olympians from like decades ago.
The second day gets 5th. The third day, in the 100 freestyle, qualifies top 8 in the morning, which I want to reiterate, top 8 in the country is a phenomenal achievement. But that night dives in this final heat. And once you've secured that top 8 spot in the morning, you are finishing top 8 in the nation, regardless of what time you go. Thomas dives in and literally looks like he doesn't know how to swim. Places 8th. This was sending a message that trans women can compete with women and win, but not always dominate.
So do you think, so are you kind of saying that maybe, and obviously it's not confirmed, that Lia kind of threw the race a little bit and waited?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's ignore all the empirical evidence of how Thomas actually performed in the real world not in Gaines's fantasy world, but the actual world, and just assume she must have intentionally thrown the race. That's clearly the only logical conclusion possible. I mean, look, there's clearly some delusion going on here with Riley Gaines when you completely ignore actual evidence in favor of some fantasy that there's no way Thomas didn't have an unfair advantage. You know, Gaines tied, got the exact same time with Thomas, but no, Thomas had some overwhelming advantage that blows all cis women out of the water. But no, it makes far more sense that this is some, master conspiracy by the transgender alphabet mafia, or that actually makes more logical sense than the empirical evidence that we saw. Riley Gaines' feelings about this are somehow make more sense.
Competing against someone who is actively giving their second best,
Mhm.
which again, in a sport where we've dedicated our entire lives, especially those 4 collegiate years, to merely shave 1/100th of a second off, merely 1/100th. We're going against someone who is actively giving their second best. That's what that is.
That's crazy. How do other swimmers feel in this? Taylor Rock and I know in that NCAA video that I was
You're
showing,
right, Kev.
Taylor
It
congratulates
is
Lia
crazy
afterwards.
to think that.
Did everybody feel supportive of this, or was there or did they feel almost pushed into being supportive, other in fears that they'd be called transphobic or anything like that?
Yeah, no, it's that. Of course, I can't speak for every single person, but I know a lot of girls in that heat who I have had conversations with feel the exact same way I do. I won't say their names because it's not my place to out them in that way, but the overwhelming majority of girls at that competition, the overwhelming majority of people in this country, even the overwhelming majority of the Democratic Party, but in regards to that competition,
she's actually right about that when it comes to the overwhelming majority of people are against trans women playing sports, including Democrats. We'll get to that a little bit later on.
overwhelming majority of us knew that was wrong. We knew that we shouldn't have to share that locker room with the man. We knew the silencing that we were facing was wrong. But again, these girls were scared of the retaliation. They were fearful. There was actually an interview just released yesterday. Her name is Paula Scanlon with Matt Walsh. I highly encourage everyone to go listen to it because she does a good job depicting of what these universities and these athletic departments and these institutions are doing to really silence these girls.
Yeah, I had a chance actually to watch that, and I was wondering because she implicates you. She basically thanks you in that video, saying that you were part of her inspiration for wanting to come forward. Obviously, she was mentioned anonymously, or was interviewed anonymously for Matt Walsh's highly successful "What Is a Woman." How does it feel to know that there are other people like Paula coming out and saying that you were an inspiration for them?
This is never something I could have wanted for myself. This is never something that I could have been equipped for. This is something that I was entirely thrusted into. Mm-hmm. And so to be a voice of reason for others, that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm continuing to do this. It would be really easy for me to essentially just ride off into the sunset, continue on with the plans that I thought I had pursuing endodontics, which is like root canals. That's what I thought my life was going to look like. Yeah. And it would be really easy for me to do that. But to know that my voice and my courage, I hate to say that this even takes courage, but I understand that it does, that my courage and my voice helped Paula find her courage and her voice. It alerts me that courage begets courage and it's contagious. And I'm certain, I'm confident that more and more women will start speaking about this, using their platforms to talk about this and how it's wrong. That being said, I feel like this conversation very quickly gets centered around women and girls, but men are not clear here either. We need men. We need men to use their voice. We need men with platforms, male athletes, coaches, whatever that looks like, to be willing to boycott, to speak on this as well. We need everyone. Men, women, coaches, medical professionals, parents, all of it.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I want to get into a lot more of that activism, but I did have one more question regarding Lia Thomas. And this is a big one that a lot of people have talked to me about. And I feel like a lot of people are skeptical of it. Do you actually think that Lia Thomas believes he is a woman? Or do you think he's, using womanhood as a costume to get attention and success? I know you can't get into his mind necessarily, but from a personal standpoint, what do you think?
I definitely think there's some delusion there. But in regards to being gender dysphoric, I've really tried to understand this. Obviously, I'm not gender dysphoric. I know I'm a woman. So this is not something I had a great understanding of what it meant to have this, to feel this. And so I've talked with many trans identifying individuals and asked what gender dysphoria is really like. And they all have told me that in regards to a locker room and undressing, being gender dysphoric, you would never undress in front of in a room full of the opposite sex. If you're truly dysphoric about your gender and what, you possess, you would never do that. It's also been confirmed since this meet that Thomas has been engaging in social media posts that claim he is an AGP, which means autogynephiliac, which means you're just sexually aroused as dressing as a woman. And that's a transvestite or cross-dresser. That's not someone who is truly transgender. Yet we were forced to participate in this fetish. That's ultimately what I think this is. Again, I can't get in his brain. I can't understand fully, but based off of the conversations that I've had and the posts and the comments and the likes that Thomas has engaged in, I think there's some speculation to be had.
There's so much to unpack here. One, people have dysphoria related to different sex characteristics that they have. It's possible Thomas has no bottom dysphoria. I have no idea. Two, it has absolutely not been confirmed that Thomas is an autogynephiliac. Thomas has an Instagram page. Gaines is talking about posts that came from another Instagram account that has Lia's name and photos on it, but there's no proof that's actually her. I mean, anybody can just create an Instagram account and put whatever name and pictures they want on it. Three, autogynephilia is widely rejected as not actually existing. Most trans women say that this does not match what their experiences are. It does not explain the experiences of trans men or genderqueer individuals. I'll link a video by anti-philosopher ContraPoints who covered in a video why autogynephilia is complete BS. 4. There is a debate within the trans community whether cross-dressers count as trans. I would say maybe they're at least trans adjacent or something. But more importantly, 5, Lia Thomas has been on cross-sex hormones for 4 years now. She lost an inch of height and significant muscle mass. Thomas is not just transgender, she's transsexual, meaning that she's actually going through the process of changing some of her sex characteristics, which you can change some, you can't change all of them, but you can change some of them. It is extremely difficult to believe that someone would go through all of that just because they're trying to win a sport or have some sexual fetish. Gaines is not just a conservative on this issue. She's a religious conservative in general. There's a whole section of this interview that I'm not going to show where Ferris and Gaines have a circle jerk about how awesome Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is and why they support his failing campaign for presidency. But social conservatives like Gaines are convinced that trans people are actually sexually perverted degenerates, even though gender and sexual orientation are two completely different things. Facts are completely irrelevant to these people.
Facts don't care about your feelings.
Absolutely. Well, transitioning from that now onto like the activism portion of your life, because this, like you said, this isn't something you had planned for. It was something you probably never imagined to be a part of. But you've now have become, I would say, probably the leading activist in terms of protecting women's sports. And a common question, Matt Walsh got this on Dr. Phil about a year ago. And I think it's really simple, but I love to hear what people have to say. Why do you care? Why does this matter to you?
Why it matters to me, several reasons. The biggest, though, is really not protecting women's sports. It's not really the freedom of speech. Of course, those are pieces of it. But what this is they're asking us to deny objective truth. They're asking us to deny biological reality.
Okay, I believe in biological truth as well. Let's go over the biological facts here. Prior to puberty, there is really no difference athletically between males and females. None whatsoever. Once puberty begins, though, sexual dimorphism occurs very quickly, creating real differences in athletic ability. That's true. This dimorphism is caused by the differences in hormones between male and female bodies, though there are some genetic facts which also contribute. Sex hormones are steroids, and like all steroids, they cause growth in your organs. Testosterone, estrogen, progesterone exist in all bodies, regardless of whether you're male or female. The sex distinction is the amount of each hormone that is produced in the body. So males tend to have higher testosterone levels than females. So it is true that sex hormones cause significant changes to the body, and that they cause athletic dimorphism between the sexes. But you can't make that statement while also not recognizing that cross-sex hormones also cause significant bodily changes. Now, we can quibble about whether cross-sex hormone therapy makes enough of a difference in reducing quote-unquote fairness. I've already gone over several of the changes that occurred to Lia Thomas of the 4 years that she's been on hormone replacement therapy. There's a great video by theoretical physicist and science educator Sabine Hossenfelder on the science behind trans athletes, which is actually very nuanced. Sorry, conservatives, like complex natural facts don't care about your brain's feelings for simplicity. But I'll leave a link in the description to Hossenfelder's video. Highly recommend you check it out. You'll definitely learn something no matter where you are on this issue. Now, when it comes to trans rights and this issue of allowing trans people to play on the sex they've transitioned to, this is the issue I personally care the least about. When it comes to pre-puberty, this does not matter. In fact, many teams involving prepubescent children are already co-ed. When it comes to intramural and informal teams in sports, it doesn't matter. I mean, let those groups and organizations decide for themselves what they want. The only time this actually matters, the only time scholarships and opportunities are up for grabs, is high school, collegiate, and professional sports. That's it. And in those specific instances, I do think it makes sense for a trans person to be on hormone replacement therapy for a certain period of time before playing on the team that they've transitioned to, which is what Thomas did. She spent her first year on hormone replacement therapy still competing on the men's team. Now, I want to be clear. I do not think that you have to medically transition to be truly trans. I'm not a trans medicalist. But in this specific circumstance, involving high school, collegiate, and professional sports, I do believe being on HRT for a certain amount of time.
They're asking us to deny biblical truth.
Biblical truth! The same truth that if you followed would completely prohibit you from ever playing sports. And says you should live under the dominion of men. Purely. The same truth that talks about the talking snake and the magic garden and the virgin birth and the guy who could allegedly bring people back from the dead and how slavery is moral. Yeah, that truth. And we've already seen she doesn't actually care about objective truth because, as I already laid out, the objective truth of what occurred at that tournament, and she ignored that in favor of some grand trans conspiracy, or as I like to call it, the trans mission.
We're living in this George Orwell dystopian novel where they're trying to make us say 2 + 2 is 5. And people are saying it. And if you don't, then you're punished. It's this concept of groupthink. And we're actively leading ourselves in that direction. That's what our administration and our universities and our institutions and the people who lead this country, that's what they want to instill. They want to control our thoughts. They want to control our feelings. They want to control what we say. And that's really scary. You can open any history book and see how that turns out for any other civilization, and it's not pretty. And so I think that, to me, is a big underlying problem of denying objective truth. 2, why this matters to me is I see the value in sports and women playing sports. I saw the benefits that I reaped. I have a little sister, and she's probably all my family. My dad, he played in the NFL. My mom, she played softball. All my family were athletes, and my little sister's probably the best athlete of us all. I'm never going to admit that to her, but I can't imagine her not having the opportunities that I had. And of course, fighting for those past women who fought for Title IX, who fought for me. It only feels right that I fight back for them. In their same lifetime, they saw the benefits of Title IX, and now they're seeing that being taken away.
Absolutely.
And the third thing of why I care, I'll be brief, is being a Christian, I see this as spiritual warfare. And I see, God put...
Spiritual warfare? And you have the audacity to claim that you care about objective truth? Objective truth ends for these people when it conflicts with their magic book and, what their imaginary friend in the sky tells them to do.
And my message to parents is to defend your daughters and to teach your sons masculinity. There's this saying, and it's hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. And it's the cycle, and it's actually pretty interesting. You can look and see how that's played out throughout history. And I think we're in this time period of weak men creating hard times, which we can only hope that means...
And here it is again. If you are a man and you do not live up to what our feelings think you should do, then you are bringing down the end of society. Not global warming, not income inequality, not Bidenflation, not endless and pointless wars. No. Some men being too feminine is bringing down society. And again, just to be clear, the masculinity that the Bible espouses says men should dominate and control women. It explicitly says women should not be bold. That's the masculinity that you want. So look, I've already gone over why I think it is clear that some delusion is going on in Gaines' head. But the title of this video also accuses her of being a narcissist as well. Gaines acts as if she's fighting some great battle. She's being courageous in protecting cis women from an onslaught of the transgenders invading women's spaces in sports. But you want to know the reality of trans athletics? Guess how many collegiate trans athletes there are in the US? Go ahead, guess. I'll wait. 32. 32 total in the entire United of these States of America. And that's not just trans women, that's all trans athletes competing at the college level. And guess how many known trans athletes there are competing at the high school level? 100. In all 50 states, there's only about 100. When Gaines is going from state to state getting these laws passed, it's usually affecting 2 kids at most in the entire state. So yeah, I think you're a narcissist if you think you're on some grand spiritual crusade by your imaginary friend in the sky, battling against less than 150 of the most marginalized people out of millions of high school and college athletes. So that's all of the interview I really wanted to cover. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to watch the whole thing. Surprisingly, there are a couple of actual empirical facts that Gaines got right. A large majority of Americans, currently 69%, in 2021 it was 62%, say transgender athletes should only be allowed to compete on sports teams that conform with their birth gender. Likewise, fewer endorse transgender athletes being able to play on teams that match their current gender identity. 26%, which is down from 34%. 39% of Americans, up from 31% in 2021, say someone they know personally has told them that they are transgender. But both Americans who know and do not know transgender individuals have become less supportive of allowing transgender athletes to play on the team of their choice. Currently, 30% of those who know a transgender person favor allowing athletes to play on teams that match their current gender identity, down from 40% in 2021. Among those who do not know a transgender person, support is now 23%, down from 31%. Among Democrats, as Gaines pointed out, 48% oppose allowing trans athletes being allowed to compete on the team they've transitioned to, compared to 47% of Democrats who supported, and the remaining 6% who are unsure. So this same survey, which is a Gallup survey, also asked about Americans' more general views on being transgender. A majority, 55%, consider changing one's gender to be morally wrong, while 43% say it's morally acceptable. At the same time, more professional sports organizations like the governing bodies for swimming, track and field, have changed their policies on permitting trans women to play on women's teams. The policies have changed to, if you ever went through a male puberty, you can no longer compete on the female sports team, regardless of how long you've been on cross-sex hormones. So a trans female would only be allowed to compete in female sports if they were on puberty blockers as a teenager and then started taking cross-sex hormones later. So this will affect Lia Thomas. I'm pretty sure she had expressed interest in swimming at the professional level. These new policies would require her to play on the men's team if she does choose to continue to swim at the professional level. So that's why I think it's really clear that Riley Gaines is a delusional narcissist. I truly believe if the NCAA had just given Gaines that trophy that day, instead of giving it to Thomas and mailing Gaines a trophy later, that she would have gone on to live her best life as a dental assistant. But unfortunately, we're stuck with a delusional narcissist who has made it her life's mission to make trans people's lives more difficult. So, leave your thoughts in the comments and let me know what you think. Thank you so much for turning into Agitation Rising, your source for local, leftist, independent journalism in Central Illinois and beyond. You can always find our articles on our blog, link in the description. Please like, subscribe, and comment. Agitation Rising is under the Strange Corners of Thought umbrella, so feel free to contribute directly to our Patreon, or donate via PayPal or Cash App. Again, links in the description. Keep agitating, keep rising, and we'll see you on the other side. Thanks.